want to turn your video on? Your video on? So then either are they in the meeting?
They are.
On if you're able to, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Are we live? Thanks. Are we live now, Tori?
Yes, we're good to
And I will call to order the regular meeting of the Berkeley Planning Commission. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, and in accordance with the ongoing state of emergency and the governor's executive order, this meeting is being conducted virtually, once again via Zoom. So with that, I will move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all. Okay, we'll move on to the roll call. Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Buckler?
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell?
Here.
Commissioner Kempner? Commissioner Murad?
Here.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Trotto? Chair Kapelanski?
Here. Okay, next up we have consideration of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? I have to go through each person. So Commissioner Campbell, any changes? Commissioner Richardson?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
Nope.
Commissioner Murad?
No.
Commissioner Buckler?
No, but whoever's phone keeps ringing, can you mute that, please?
That is mine, and I will try to do that. Commissioner Patterson?
No.
And I'm sorry, guys. I will turn this off. Okay, I think that's everyone. So do I have any motions to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay. Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Campbell,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Okay, next up we have the minutes from the June 23rd meeting. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes? Okay. Does anyone have any motions to approve?
So moved. Support.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Campbell, any changes to the motion?
No.
Commissioner Richardson?
No.
Commissioner Murad?
No.
Commissioner Patterson?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Buckler?
No.
Okay, Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Okay, next up, communications. Ms. Schluto, do we have any communications this evening?
No, we have not received any communications.
Okay, that brings us to citizen comment. If any members of the public wish to speak during the appropriate agenda item or on any item not on the agenda at this time, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you've called in. Comments can also be submitted to planning@berkeleymish.net. A reminder that the Planning Commission will not engage you in discussion and to please state your name and address and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Ms. Schluto, do we have anyone who wishes to comment?
I don't see anyone in the queue,
Okay.
and I have not received any emails.
Okay, then we will move on and close the first citizen comment, and that brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is a discussion of the progress on the master plan. Ms. Schluto?
Yes, with us this evening is Megan Mason-Minnock from Carlisle Wortman Associates. She's here to give us a presentation and bring us up to date on all of the wonderful community engagement activities that we've been doing over the past couple of months. So, Megan, take it away.
Thanks. And we also want to extend our thanks to the steering committee, who's been an integral part of the process so far and have really helped to guide us with the pivot that we had to undertake. And also thank you for your guidance and information through your staff, and happy to be here tonight. We really wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of things. Included in your packet was a final report on the survey that was done in the month of May. We had 1,317 responses, which is a great response rate. And again, thank you to you and everybody else who participated and also shared the information to get the word out. We felt that, and then looking to the size of the response and the similarities between the demographics of Berkeley, and you'll find that at the end of the report that was sent to you. We feel confident that this, because of the breadth of the community, it can be one of the many factors in decision-making, in the decision-making process in the master plan. We would want to emphasize that it shouldn't be the only factor, but we feel it's a due to that level of participation, it's a valid thing to take into your decision-making process. We also completed the 8 video presentations. We had around 20 live viewers at a time, and then differing amounts of viewership throughout the post and YouTubes. We would really appreciate your advice on how to find a wider audience for those video presentations. Also in your packet were a report about the 8 focus groups that we did with business owners, developers, realtors, seniors, religious leaders, board members and commissioners like yourself, and some of you who are here tonight, and also residents and young families. And again, we attached a report on those. I would just want to maybe, if it's okay with the chair, to open it up to the Planning Commission to see if you had any reactions or questions on those 2 reports, or also advice on sharing the video presentations, and then like to take some more time a little bit later to dive into some questions that we asked you about focus items, specifically Greenfield, 12 Mile, and Coolidge.
Sure. So at this point, you're just looking for feedback on the public participation and in particular the video presentations.
Yeah, and yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments on either of those items?
Ms. Chairman,
Yes.
Ms. Marty. I have a ton of comments written down, which I don't think we can handle here. Like usual, I wrote all over this thing. There's a lot of information on here, feedback, and a lot of it's conflicting. Of course, we all knew that. There's no consensus. To see a lot of things on here where regarding what we want in this town and what we don't want in this town, and I can sum it up in one thing from reading these documents. We have a dilemma. Generally, and I believe the professional planners may agree with this. We want bigger, deeper sites along our commercial district, but we don't really want to disrupt the single-family residents that live there. And that's the thing. I've been on this this committee for a long time, 20 years now, and that's always been the problem. What do we do with our commercial strips, for lack of a better word, along Coolidge especially, and 12 Mile especially, because we have these 2 things fighting each other, and I don't know if I know the answer. And I would like some input. And I go reading these documents, and it's all over these documents. Preserve the residential, make things deeper, but don't make things deeper. And I think that's the crux of the thing we're fighting with in our town and many other towns like us. And I don't know what to do about it. And I was wondering if they had some, maybe Megan had some comments. And, that's what we were fighting on the last master plan. That's what we fight every time we rezone a property. Maybe people want to live here without excessive, that's the wrong word, without large business and entertainment that we would see in Royal Oak or Birmingham. Maybe we really want to be a bedroom community with small homes and nice, not necessarily small homes, but smaller homes, but nice neighborhoods. And maybe we don't want the commercial fingering back into our neighborhoods. So that's just a overall comment I have to make about all this reading material. We had quite a bit. There's 60-something pages of reading material this month. But from what I read and the comments I got back, that's our dilemma. Anybody else have a comment on that?
Ms. Buckler, you have your hand raised.
I do. So I tend to agree with Marty, but I also think this survey returned I had concerns about the survey, the way the questions were posed, and like what it would return to us, and it did exactly what I predicted, which is it told us a lot of things we already knew, and that there's a lack of agreement amongst the residents of Berkeley, which is not unusual, but it doesn't give us any marching orders. There's people who want no change whatsoever, and there's people who want change, and there's people who like this and they don't like that. And but every community has that. So the survey didn't do anything except validate the norm, and it didn't help us. So it goes back to every project will be reviewed within the context in which it's provided and the situation at the time, but it doesn't give us any clear marching orders. And a master plan, again, it's a blueprint. It's not set in stone. It's not a set of plans that you must decode. It gives us something to work with. And unfortunately, the survey puts us back where it doesn't, it does not help in a lot of respects. And it just makes clear that there's vast differences of opinion. And I think we're like, and then we will trod forward.
Are you all set, Michelle? Okay, so to kind of follow up on both of those comments, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised right now, and I want to get this thought in before I forget what I was going to say. But you're right that the survey does have a lot of conflicting direction and doesn't give us a clear path forward. But maybe that in itself is a path. Maybe it shows us that we have to look at some of the other parts of how you build a master plan to determine what we need in the city. I mean, the path basically that the survey is pointing us towards is that everyone has a lot of different opinions and different perspectives, and maybe this one piece of the puzzle is not what we use as our dominant overarching thing that says you need to go in this direction. It's pointing us towards that we have to look at some of the other parts of how you do that, demographics and national trends and data, instead of maybe having this survey as a big chunk of what direction we need to go in. I'm trying to put a positive spin on it.
Well, no.
Absolutely.
Mr. Murad?
Yeah, I'm going to echo kind of a little bit of what Mr. Smith and Ms. Buckler commented about, that we haven't been given any direction by these results. So what's the next step? Pick what we want to, what we think. You know, we haven't been given marching orders. So I don't know what the next step is. I really don't.
Okay, so this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
How do you raise your hand on this thing?
So I think if you hover over yourself, you can do it. I do it from the participants. If you select participants at the bottom, you'll see all the participants on the right-hand side, and then on the very bottom, it'll say raise hand.
Or you can just raise your hand in space like I
Just
do.
go like this.
That's what that seems to work.
Sorry if I missed it.
So, 2 or 3 comments. The survey is just part of a data set, just part of a data set. Other parts of that data set are, economic and sociological, educational information, both local, regional, and national scale. I don't know if I totally agree that the survey gives us no direction. To me, what this part of the data set is telling us is that people basically don't want the community to change. They want it to remain a single family residential community, a predominantly single family residential community. It certainly is true that we may have already known that. I won't argue with anybody that says we already knew that, but there's still some value in having that confirmed in a survey. We also are aware that people want more options in town for entertainment, restaurants, entertainment, a grocery store. And I think our challenge, and I'm getting back to what Marty said here, we know, and professional planners know, that the economics dictate whether those kinds of amenities will actually locate in a community like ours, and the economics are something that the public doesn't really know about. And so for us to accommodate this desire for more choice in those areas, there will need to be a fairly lengthy public education component to this. I think we'll have to let people know that, for example, if you want a grocery store here, you have to have so many square feet available and so much parking available, and that's just the way it is in 2020, as opposed to 1979. So I think there's value in the survey. I also just would say that there's a desire for more recreational amenities, and I, even though the responses are divided on whether the community center should be rebuilt or a new one should be built, I tend to look at it as, well, there's still a majority that want something new there. Whether it's rebuilt or brand new is a detail that we can pursue, but we do know that people want to have that, and we can work with that information as well. So I don't want to overblow the survey. I don't want to say, because the answers are mixed, we can do nothing, because we're not charged with relying just on that survey. It's just one data point for us to work with among many others, and it's kind of up to us to gather it all together, and we will need to try to educate the public if we're going to help the public understand what it's going to take to bring the amenities that they say they want into town. So just one last point. I don't want to go on and on, which I am, but as far as Greenfield goes, it's a dilemma, and I think the only thing that's clear about Greenfield is what was tried there has not worked. It's just not worked. So for something to work there, something different to work there, there's going to have to be some changes made. And I think our consultant made that point in our steering committee the other night. You're just going to have some change. If you want change on Greenfield, we're going to have to do something with the zoning there, or there'll be no change. So, if there's change, then some toes are going to get stepped on. So we have to decide first, do we want to status quo Greenfield, or do you want something else there? If there's something else there that's more desirable, then it's up to us to help shape the environment to change things there. All right, well, that's enough from me for now. Sorry for going on.
Okay. Mr. Murad?
Well, like Greenfield, let's talk about Greenfield for a second. We did a lot off the last master plan to rezone Greenfield and even part of Elwood to try to attract different types of uses to that street. That, to me, that's one of the biggest challenges to the master plan. Any kind of master plan is how do we get a developer to come in, acquire the property they need to develop something like, I'm looking at some of these things, where people are talking about multifamily, mixed use, senior housing, you know, I mean, Mr. Smith is in that business of doing senior housing, and he knows, he can tell you, it requires a lot of land. We don't have that here in Berkeley, you know. I mean, we're almost 100% built. There's not many empty properties that, you know, that even somebody could build a home on. There's very few left. So I don't, you know, I don't know what needs to be done to attract that business.
The issue on Greenfield, this is Marty again. The issue on Greenfield is like everything else, and this came out. I did watch your seminars in the last, or the webinars, the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it came out several times. The problem is, for a development of any size, the problem is the small lots, the 40-foot lots, the 50-foot lots. You have to assemble a collection of lots, and not just 2 or 3. We're talking 8, 10, 12, whatever the number is. And that's a big issue. And it's almost impossible from experience in a previous developed community made of very small lots to assemble something big enough to do a cost-effective development. You know, we all want senior housing, or we all want some kind of multifamily housing. But to be able to do something, I mean, you know, the example is what's happening at the La Salette. Assuming it is happening, I don't know. I haven't heard boo from it for quite a while. But that's a big chunk of property. The school is a big chunk of property. So you need something large to make things work, and that's the nut, and that is very difficult for someone to come in and assemble those properties. And we all know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it comes down to that, to redevelop, as we keep saying. Our master plan from 15 years ago talked about one of the biggest pieces of property in town, and it's a good location on 12 Mile, is the Department of Public Works. And it's in a good location. It's a good chunk of property. That's ideal location to put up some kind of new development, townhomes, multifamily housing. We probably have to find a place for the DPW, but it's all in there. But that's the kind of property you need to make something work. And there's, you know, 3 or 4 of those in town. So trying to assemble something on Greenfield, Coolidge, I don't care where you are, 11 Mile, we can rezone, we can wish, but it's going to be a very difficult thing to get something to follow through.
Okay, so before we get into the Greenfield discussion, because it looks like that's what everyone's anxious to talk about, and I agree. Any other comments on the survey or the video presentations, which I thought were a great educational component as far as how to reach a wider audience? I'm sure we can all send you any ideas if anything comes to us, but I thought you guys did a nice job of trying to do that.
Yeah.
Any other comments on the survey then, or the video presentations, Ms. Buckler?
Just one thing to follow up on Marty's comment about multi-residential housing. The survey indicates, if I'm reading it correctly, that the residents want it to remain a single-family community.
Yeah.
So
yes, when asked about the housing types, but then when asked about housing for specific groups, people said, you know, had a favorable impression to go forward and have housing and plan for housing for seniors and people who are disabled.
Right.
Which there may have been a disconnect in their minds in terms of what type of housing that is. And that goes back to perhaps as we move on an education issue about what those are and then where they can go. And just from our perspective, when looking at your community, we completely agree that there's not a lot of space. There's not a lot of places for big changes because you're primarily built out as a single family residential community that was designed in the 1910s and the 1920s. And so that's an inherent conflict in terms of looking at how you redevelop. And really what you've expressed, and we agree, is those places for changes are along the corridors. And so then how do you create the environment for those changes to happen? And also when we talked to the steering committee, as Mr. Richardson expressed, we really then talked about that really it's an if-then question. So if we can go, if the parcel depths can get deeper, and that does go into the neighborhoods, then we'll get this type, then we may get this type of development. But also that type of development is something that's long-term. It either happens in fits and starts, or it happens over a long period of time. So thanks for that ability just to respond real quickly to that.
Sure. Do you want to then go ahead, Marty?
Yeah, and again, you're absolutely right, Megan. In the survey, many times, not the survey, well, all the comments, your webinars and everything, there's a big disconnect, and you hear it many times through the documentation and the webinars. When I'm a senior, maybe I am already, when it's time to leave my home, I can't stay in Berkeley, and that's very unfortunate. But the disconnect is, what do you build? What do you or what do you provide or for those people? So we do want it, but we don't want it. As far as the mass and the sizing and things like that. So just I could talk about that for hours, as you all know. I do have one overall comment. There is a lot of information here. This is not the format, quite honestly, to be able to have a very good discussion. And unfortunate, we're stuck in this format. I don't know how long. I would really, and I don't want to put anything off, but I would really like the opportunity to, I don't know if it's a workshop or just an auxiliary meeting where we can sit around a table and just talk about stuff. And we have all this input. And again, most of it's stuff we already know. We've been talking about this since I've been here 20 years, as I said. But this is a difficult format, as disjointed as it is, to really get into the meat of these issues. And depending on what's happening with meetings and getting together, it would really be nice that the 9, 10, 11, 12 of us get a chance to sit down with an audience, if that's acceptable, and have a big discussion on these items. Because that's a lot where there's a lot of opportunity to educate the public, because there's a lot of contradicting information here, and I know it's all different people. They want this, but they want that, and we have the same feelings. But this is not the format to really discuss all this information in any depth. That's just my feeling. So,
yeah, and from our perspective, the intent of this portion of the master plan was to surface what are the issues that are important, and also where are the tensions, and so from our perspective, that's pretty clear, and so then the next phase is talking about the so what. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? And that's really talking about these hard choices that you were alluding to, Marty, and we'll need your guidance on how to do that. And one of the things we wanted to talk to you tonight about in terms of Greenfield, Coolidge, and 12 Mile is what conversations to have, what conversations are a no-go that we shouldn't have, or in terms of the menus of choices, or then, yes, these are good choices and these are things that we need to take to the public and have this information about that, etc. Or this is the context where we looked at this 12 years ago, and this is what happened then. And so in our memo to you, we had focus items, which we're intending to go through. We went through the Greenfield, 12 Mile, and Coolidge a week ago with the steering committee, and then coming to you. And what we'd like to do is to keep doing that process at least through August, and then look to do something in September. Again, if we could have the meeting that you were talking about, that would be lovely. But that may not be possible, but it might be possible to do something like a walking tour or walking tours or gathering outside, where we do something like this. Also, in another community, we are having a Zoom open house with breakout rooms and things like that. So we'll have that under our belt by August. And that might be another option to do that kind of format that you were talking about with examples. But would really also love to hear the context of the decisions and the history of Coolidge, 12 Mile, and Greenfield, and your input on which of those, how to frame those discussions and what choices should be there. So if it's okay, I would like to just jump to that, and I can share my screen for just some context. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Skip. We're going to skip over mission, vision, and values because I'm not sensing that that's where your heart is right now. So we're going to go where your passion is. Greenfield. So as we talked about, as you talked about, this is an area that you've had planned and zoned for transition. So this right here is the zoning, and this over here is the existing land use. So you can see that the zoning, and this is a blow up here with the aerial next to it. You can see that you've had this zoning, and also, you know, in the master plan, you have this for a mixed use area. But then looking, you only have a little bit of multifamily, some on 12 Mile. That's a urgent care, correct?
Yeah.
Some parks, a park, two places of worship, with some green space, and then you get a little more down here. So that envision of this being mixed use, as you said, hasn't happened. And again, one of and as you said, the real crux of the matter is property development and the assembly of properties, because probably to get something like an office, an urgent care, even multifamily, where it's worth somebody's dollar to go and do it, they probably need to assemble these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties. And if this person holds out, then that's a hard deal. Also, there's no vacancies around here. In the survey, when you've looked at the open-ended comments, some people said that this didn't look, the corridor itself wasn't as well kept as some other places in Berkeley. But you know, you don't have a lot of vacancy, and you don't seem to have a lot of property devaluement there. So that's not something to say that this is an area that's in transition. And one of the things that we were curious about was why, you know, you've got 1 block here, 3 blocks here, 3 blocks here, 1 block here, none here, 1 block, you know, it kind of goes in here, and then down, and then 2 blocks. And then, so just was wondering if folks on the Planning Commission could share the thought process or history. I'm sure there's a history. I'm sure there's a story about, you know, why some places were 3, why some places were 1, and what was the story behind this zoning being applied as it was?
Well, I can with my poor memory, we went deeper at the nodes, 11 Mile,
Mm-hmm.
and north and south of 12 Mile is kind of a gateway. And Tim, you were there, I believe, at the time. The idea was at those intersections, so-called gateways, whatever you want to call them, we felt at the time, let's go a little deeper there, see if we can get something to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, the
Yeah,
first couple of
by the churches, we went in a little bit deeper.
a little bit to see what could happen, right?
Right. But I'm surprised that we didn't. I thought we did the whole strip the same
I
way.
did too, but we may, for some reason, may not have.
Yeah,
Quite honestly, I remember from way back then, the first couple of blocks south of Webster, say we basically didn't know what the hell to do with that. You
Right
remember
here.
that, Tim? I'm being polite too.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we just did not know what to do with that. You know, it was difficult enough from Beverly down to 11 Mile, and you see there's a hodgepodge of zoning. And you're right, Tim. I thought all the blocks were.
Yeah, I
zoned.
thought every block was at least the block facing Greenfield. And then, like you said, at the major road intersections, we came down the whole block and went both sides of Elwood, thinking that
Yes.
a development might want to close that part of the road, and you know, like we were thinking, like more like a, you know, like a senior housing complex, you know, a small shopping center or something, you know. But I'm kind of surprised that one block. That I think that's between Catalpa and is it Oxford there?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the background. The idea was to, at the main roads, 11 Mile, 12 Mile,
Yep.
increase it a little bit. And this is a tough corridor. We all know that.
Yep.
It's a really tough corridor because you don't have control over what's on the other side.
Exactly.
It's a 5-lane busy road. And what's on the other side is a hodgepodge, but if you look at the parcel depths, they're much deeper as well.
Oh, yeah.
And also to the north and to the south and adjacent municipalities.
And this is the only spot that has single family residential forever until you get north of 13 Mile, where both sides are single family.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
With some exceptions. So it's really it's a tough one.
And ideally you want like facing like. And ideally, a residential road would not be a 5-lane busy road.
Yep.
But we're not dealing in ideals.
No.
Some of the things that one of the things that came out when talking with the steering committee was, again, the idea of going too deep, at least to Elwood, in a certain area, but then having the front door of this, and this being a residential zone, not just single family residential, but different types of residential, duplexes, triplexes, senior housing, those things being allowed. But then their front door facing out on Elwood,
Mm-hmm.
rather than their back door being towards these existing houses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was some of our discussion too.
Yes.
In the areas where we doubled and tripled, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
three parcels in and covering the street, that was kind of the thought.
And there's some discussion where there were big properties that maybe they opened on, you know, if there's a larger project, we'd rather not have that project open up onto Elwood. We'd rather have that entry off of Greenfield. Am I recall that, Tim?
Yep, I do.
So there's a mix and match there. But I could
Okay.
see if we could get into some smaller scale, Megan, as you're saying, duplexes, you know, quads, triplexes, whatever, low height, off of Elwood, and then you protect the rear of the building off of Greenfield. You screen it and do whatever you want to do, and keep it a residential scale. So it's the people on the east side of Elwood can, you know, have a better chance of living with it, or we don't ruin a bunch of neighborhoods. So that would make a lot of sense.
The other idea that I'm hearing that we didn't discuss with the steering committee, but is just coming to mind now, is when you look at this is a lot of zoning. Like, this is a long strip.
It's a mile and a half.
All zoned the same.
Mm-hmm.
What might be a better idea in order to make it happen is to not open it up to so many pieces. Is there a better part of Greenfield to say, okay, some of it we're just going to leave, we're going to leave single family, because we know that this is a hard thing to do in terms of acquiring these properties, and looking for it to concentrate in one area or a certain area. That's a choice. And we could take that to the community. Also, there are things that we could talk about in terms of design regulations of what would be needed in order for it to be palatable, or for people not to feel threatened, or for people to feel that it's an asset. But that's kind of it's a sticky wicket. We know, especially coming in to the conversation later after you've had a controversy about form-based code, which is usually the way that you have those design regulations in zoning, to make sure that it is, whatever is being designed has enough open space and depth and design in order to fit into the neighborhood or whatever context. So what we're looking for your advice on is, what questions do we take to the public about Greenfield, and how to best phrase them and talk about them?
So one thing, Megan, that seemed to work well for the downtown master plan, when you're kind of talking about design regulations and how to present those in a way that maybe gives people options. So is to maybe show, this is an example of a fourplex, for example, designed to look like a single family home.
Okay.
And here's an example of 4 townhouses all next to each other. Which one do you like better?
Mm-hmm.
That might be a way to present it to everyone that seemed to work well with the DDA guidelines. Just to follow up on some of the other things, I think that it has to be both the depth of both parcels. It has to go to Elwood. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense at all. And if we had regulations that required potential developers to make sure that their development reflected the characteristics of a single family home more than multiple family developments, I think it might be more palatable.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I can't, and just to give everyone a heads up, since we're in the share screen mode, I can't see anyone raising their hand. So just jump in if you want to say something.
This is Marty. I agree with Megan about the mile and a half of zoning. But I think we tried to do that in a way by varying the depths of the master plan, which later became some zoning. So Megan, you're on the right track. We break it up, and that, if you look at it with the funky shape of the zoning district, that's kind of what our attempt was back then. And maybe it was a little amateurish or misguided, but I think that's what we tried to do, because that was a theme along 12 Mile, as a theme along Coolidge the last time, was to break up the monotony, break up the strip. And what you see here, although, like I said, it may not have been that successful looking at the map, but that's what we did try to do. Tim, if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, you're pretty accurate, Marty.
Yeah. So,
but we could continue on that and maybe change it to both sides. Like, I like the idea of using design guidelines to keep it single family scale. And maybe we do extend it to the one side of Elwood.
I think it's unrealistic. I would agree with Kristen, and I know Ben would too. It's unrealistic to think that anything's going to happen on just these one parcel deep.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So it's either got to go the whole block or not at all. To go to this third block is really hard, because also then you're asking a developer to think about the other thing that they're going to have to do is say, okay, what happens to this road? Does it cul-de-sac? Do I have to have another? You're making them decisions about infrastructure and streets, where then it makes it be a really big project. So if we're looking for and where it was 3 in, we haven't seen that movement hasn't been the same as anywhere where you have 2 in, 2 in or not. So just, if we could look at 1 in, 2 in, and 3 in and see something that changed in your land use, then would say by all means. But this vacation or having to deal with a public street is just another hurdle. So unless they're going to make a lot of money and can go really high, I don't think that this might not be get you where you want to be.
Yeah, and the idea of those areas was to get a deeper project or a larger project like a assisted living or whatever. And but I like what you're saying. We take the the block,
Right.
and at the time when that master plan was developed 15 years ago, we weren't looking at this missing middle, so to speak, type of a residential, multifamily residential. We were looking at a possibly larger scale. So that makes a lot of sense. Looking at it 15 years later, that makes a lot of sense.
Great. All right. Well, anything else to share on Greenfield before I ask you about 12 Mile and Coolidge?
Hi, it's Greg. I just have one comment. I know just driving down Elwood, it seems like a lot of those homes have recently been remodeled.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say flipped, but a lot of them on Elwood seems like last summer was a very busy street for construction, building those homes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just worried that if we talk about going in too deep, or affecting Elwood, we're going to get a lot of resistance from those residents, because a lot of those homes have been flipped or whatever we call it, redesigned.
Okay. Well, what we can do is work with your staff to go into assessing and see the ones that have had remodels or have had recent sales. Maybe they might be concentrated on a couple of blocks, and those might be taken. That might be an argument to say, okay, let's take these off the table, or again, look to concentrate it around the nodes just 3 deep, and then with this other zoning, maybe look at that. Does that still stay? Does that become a single family zone? Does it plan for single family? Do you leave it how it is? Things like that.
Perfect.
What has happened is that has been the more affordable couple of blocks in the zip code of Berkeley, and it seems people have taken possession of it and pride of it and making neighborhoods out of it more so than it was before. At the time, I believe there's quite a lot of rentals along there, and again, I don't have the numbers, but people have taken a lot of pride and ownership and built up those neighborhoods. As we discussed earlier, it's difficult to deepen anything. You're going into people's neighborhoods. So that's the dilemma we work with. But I think since this was done, you're absolutely right. There's been a lot of development in this area, or redevelopment, pride of ownership, blah, blah, blah. So that's something that we, obviously need to take into consideration.
So while we can take that into consideration, I mean, just because we change the future land use or even the zoning on a property doesn't mean that new or refabbed single family home can't stay there.
Oh, absolutely. But there's a stigma to it that you rezone my property something else, the value went down. And
right, but maybe that stigma is the key word. I mean, did the value really go down?
Well, how many times we've argued that?
I know. I don't want the plan to be reactionary. I want us to be forward thinking and data based.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right. Moving on to Coolidge and 12 Mile. And when talking about the survey, I think some of you expressed this dilemma that came out of the survey, and sometimes in the focus groups as well, is that what people say that they want is a pedestrian oriented street. So something closer to what you see here on Coolidge, with the road diet, in that there's trees and sidewalks and places to and places to gather, and it's a pleasant walk. And in this photo, you can actually, it's a Google Street View. You can see people walking down Coolidge, whereas a lot of sometimes what you have, especially on the western end of 12 Mile, which this is the shot of that, is that while it has some of the urban design things in terms of trees and a sidewalk there for walkability, you don't see a lot of people there because some of the buildings don't have windows, and also you don't have a vibrancy of uses in those areas. And what people were saying was they wanted more variety of restaurants. They wanted more variety of things to do. They wanted things for their kids to do, to their teenagers to do, to hang out. They wanted family-oriented businesses. They wanted places that they could go. They didn't have to leave town in order to grocery shop, in order to go to a movie, in order to do the things that they'd like to do. But those things are not going to happen without a change. And so again, there's this dilemma. One of the things we wanted to talk to you about, and then if possible, talk to the public about, was, what happens on Coolidge. There was a lot of feedback on the road diet. And there were some people who liked it, but there were some, both in focus groups and in the survey, there were some vehement no's. But a lot of that focused on the bicycle lane, not necessarily on the on-street parking. And in one of our interviews with business owners, a business owner on Coolidge shared that as a business owner, loved it. Great for their customers. They could park, they could come in. It helped them. Hated it as a resident and as a driver because it slowed them down. So some of these things is that you have to know that you're not going to please all the people all the time. So then what goes into and expresses your values and what in terms of what the community says they want and how to achieve that vision. So one of the discussions we're suggesting to have is to say, okay, well, the road diet on Coolidge, maybe with the bike lane didn't work, but are there other options that can be looked at, including you could widen the sidewalk and have more spaces for gathering spaces, or more spaces for folks to have sidewalk sales or dining outside. You could continue to have the on-street parking that helps slow traffic. It helps businesses. It helps it make it be more walkable. That would be a suggested conversation that we would say to have. And in talking to the steering committee, also they said, in terms of streetscapes and creating gathering places, they felt like a lot of that work had been done by the DDA master plan. And there was some community consensus that we should go forward on these things. But just know that folks are going to have opinions about design and what it should be. So I was wondering your feedback specifically on talking about Coolidge and road diet and streetscape and design there. Whether to have that, do you feel like that discussion has been done and should be set aside and just implement, bring in what's been said in the DDA plan? Or do you think this is something that does need a little bit more conversation in the master plan process?
So Megan, just to follow up on that, I guess I agree with the steering committee that we did a lot of this work as part of the DDA master plan, and I would hate to duplicate efforts, especially on a plan that it seemed to have a very, was received very positively by a lot of the community, and they really were engaged and liked the process. The survey, talked about people want a vibrant downtown with this great mix of uses and all of these different things. And as Mark said earlier, you have to have the correct setup of your streetscape and the correct population density to support that. So I guess this kind of looks to me like another opportunity for education. I'd be interested to know why people don't think the road diet works. If it's because it makes traffic slower, then if we make sidewalks wider and replace the bike lanes with some other use, traffic will still be slower. That's the point of road calming measures. So I hate to see the DDA having invested so much capital in this road diet, so much work into this road diet and the bike lanes, if we're just going to replace it with another road calming feature that people will also not like because it slows traffic, but the whole point of it is to slow the traffic.
Right.
I don't know if you have a response to that or if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but we're trying to calm the traffic so that we have people going by businesses more slowly, that you feel more comfortable on walking on the sidewalk, which I know I do. I love the on-street parking on Coolidge. That's great. I'd love to get the crosswalks back because I'm back to just darting across Coolidge at random points again. So I think it's an opportunity for education.
Kristen, you're right. I'm sorry, Ms. Chairman, you're right.
No, go ahead.
You know, all through these documents, again, people hate the road diet, but I think it's an opportunity for education. You know, what do we want Coolidge to be? It is our road. We own it. To me, the bike lanes are pretty much a space filler. You know, we had the curb to curb, we had the dimensions. The parking's fantastic now. I've been on the bike lanes occasionally, but that's just a space filler. We had so much, 50 whatever 4 feet to work with, we filled it up. I don't think the bike lanes are the most important thing here. It's people complain about it being crowded at rush hour, slow. Well, what do we want it to be? There's a lot of comments. I saw, maybe not a lot, but several comments, take it back the way it was. The way it was doesn't work, and it never worked. And all we're going to do is shove, we're not here to shove other cars, people who live other places so they can go other places at their convenience. I like the 3 lanes. It is a pain in the butt at certain times of day. As residents, we know how to get around that, of course. But I think it's very short-sighted to say after a year and a half, whatever it's been, abandon it because it's crowded. I like the parking. The wide parking, people can open their doors without being afraid of it, their mirror getting broken off. The drive lanes are wider. It is slower, both as more, backups. There's some backups at times, and the traffic drives slower. If we lose the bike lanes, so be it. Maybe we bring the curbs out, whatever. But I think we're people who want to go back to the way it was, in my opinion, is a very short-sighted thing. We're not here to appease people who don't live here, who want to go elsewhere and use us as a conduit. And that's something that the city of Berkeley, the residents have to decide. What do we want our town, our road in our town to be? And I'm sorry, I was on my soapbox there. But I think that's a big opportunity for education and for a good debate.
And I see that Tim had his hand up too.
Yeah, kind of echoing what Marty said. I've never been a fan of the bike lanes. I think a lot of the people that are negative about the road diet, that's why they're negative about the bike lanes. Honestly, what's it taking to get, during rush hour, how much time has it added to somebody's commute? 3-5 minutes? That's not a lot of time.
And whose commute is longer? People want to go through our town.
Right. And
So,
honestly, if they don't like using Coolidge, then go to Greenfield or Woodward. Both of those roads move very quickly and very fast.
exactly.
This is our downtown. I think take that, and I agree with Marty. The reason why they put that bike lane in is because they had the space. But wouldn't it be great to have wider sidewalks in there, so that if there's a restaurant that wants to open and have some outdoor seating, and then your sidewalks aren't crowded? That's the ideal. One of my other thoughts was there might be enough room without the bike lanes to do angled parking, but that causes other issues. So I think just expand the sidewalk, maybe make the road lanes a little bit wider, and I think it works great. But I also agree too that, they did spend a lot of time on this in the DDA master plan. So let's just kind of maybe make that suggestion about removing the bike lanes. I agree with the chair's comment too about the crosswalks. I think when they did those crosswalks, it should have been done in reverse. Let's do the road diet first and then the crosswalks. So.
Okay.
And
Right.
the ideal, I was around back when 12 Mile was done, when we did a road diet on 12 Mile. 12 Miles used to be 5 lanes like Coolidge used to be with no parking. Coolidge had parking. So, you know, so, and we did an experiment too with the road diet to show that you could get on-street parking on 12 Mile with 4 lanes. So I think, you know, I think it works. I can't, you know, the goal of a road diet is to slow traffic.
Right.
So it's been 100% successful. I just don't think that they need that they absolutely need the bike lanes.
And what we found in other communities is that bicycle lanes in particular, as part of any road diet, are the most emotion-provoking item in the possibility that you could have in the road diet. And I think it's just that if you don't have an education component about how to drive with bikes and how to cycle with cars and to use the bike lane, then everybody feels insecure. And so sometimes that's the emotion coming through, and it gets attached to a quote unquote road diet, not necessarily bicycle lane. But what I'm hearing from you all is that the DDA plan is a solid job and is a good investment. And what we should do is build off of that in terms of education and say, in the future, as you make improvements to these areas, these are possibilities to do it, and this is how it would implement your values.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I was a proponent of the road diet and also of the bike lanes. Yes, bike lanes do arouse emotions in people, including myself. I have very little patience with all the criticism of the road diet. To me, Coolidge is a much nicer street today than it was a couple of years ago. Having said that, the bike lane part of it is not an essential part of the concept of the road diet. It's a feature that was included. You know, I think that's probably something that we can bow to community will on. I mean, I've ridden on those bike lanes in my bike lots of times. I could care less about the traffic. I just don't see what's making people nervous. But that's, if they're nervous, they're nervous. There's something I can do about that. And so I think it's realistic to talk about bending on that particular point if we have to, but I would not want to abandon the road diet altogether on Coolidge. I think it's a much better street now, and whatever delays there are minor. I mean, come on, you can't put up with 2 or 3 minute more travel on that street, you know, in return for not having to be nervous about speeding cars and speeding trucks. It's just something I don't have a whole lot of patience with. But so I'd like to stick with the road diet. Bike lane part of it is, I would say, negotiable as we go forward. I personally don't want to give the bike lanes up, but you know, you got to be realistic too. So that's where this commissioner is coming from.
Mm-hmm. And the master plan doesn't need to specify whether the bike lane remains or whether it's something else in terms of, but it sounds like, you know, the main thing is to make it a walkable street with slow speeds, and bringing it down from 5 lanes to 3 lanes is part of that. All right. Michelle Buckler raised their hand.
I want to go back to the Coolidge. The idea of the road diet was safety. That has to be continuously, you know, we have to focus on that. And I drive that road every day, rush hour, and it has not slowed me down. It is so much safer. It moves so much better. You don't have weaving in and out. It works, and it did what it was supposed to do. The bike lanes, I like them, but they're irrelevant, quite frankly. The idea was there's emergency vehicle access, which living a block off of Coolidge, I hear them go down. They can get down smoothly, and the traffic moves smoothly, and that's what it's supposed to do. And it'd be nice if we could do that on some of our other roads too, but
Okay,
I think it's a distraction to talk about the bike lanes.
got it. All right. The other thing we wanted to talk to you about again is this lot depth. And so if you watch the webinar on corridors, this image is going to be familiar. And you can see that, so this is Buckingham, this is 12 Mile, this is Oakshire. But the lot depth here, this is 340 feet as compared to, this is, your original plat, which was 40 feet wide and 100 feet deep. So it wasn't designed for cars and parking at all. But as you can see, maybe over here, some of it's a little too much, or, ideally, if this is part of your downtown, this building's pulled up and hugs that, and hugs that corner and, keeps this space. So in terms of implementing those things, and we looking at your zoning, you kind of had these two areas where there are nodes where, again, it creeps out into the neighborhoods. And the brown is your zoning for parking. And here is the zoning for multifamily and some other different things down in Coolidge once you get south of Catalpa. And then one of the things to know about that 40-foot by 100-foot parcel is that it's really hard to make a building work on that. So this is your standard 4,000 square foot lot. A 2,200 square foot building requires 7 parking spaces. However, this quick and dirty back of the napkin, we've only managed to squeeze 4 spaces on the site. But 45% of the lot is taken up by the parking or the driveway. And so essentially you can't build this on your standard lot. Whereas one policy option is that you take that same 4,000 square lot and don't require parking at all. We're not suggesting that you do this all down 12 Mile or all down Coolidge, but there might be some places, especially where you want to concentrate and say that this is our core of our downtown, where that would be a good policy idea. And really the handshake deal between you and the community and you and the business owners is that you're saying, we, the city, we're going to make sure there's parking. We're either going to have a municipal parking lot, we're going to have a parking district, we're going to have something, we may have shared parking, so that we create enough parking that you, business, your customers can park, and we can find a place for you and your employees to park. But when you do that, then you have a 7,200 square foot building, and that's a lot more economically feasible. And then looking at what you have in this area, you can see that sometimes it goes 1 lot in, sometimes it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 lots in, 5, and then sometimes it's not. It's not there at all. And we kind of looked at Coolidge. We put these in just to see again where things had happened on Coolidge in terms of, this is your 2007 plan. This is what it's implemented. This is what your existing land use is. So this is what happened with the plan, and this is where the zoning is. And so again, you've got these. You've got it. It's pretty solid through here, but then when we get down here, these blocks are bigger, and you've got more depth. But when you go to 12 Mile, so your plan again. It has some jagged edges in terms of how far back you go back into these neighborhoods. and that's directly implemented into your zoning. You can see that it's kind of like a gap tooth smile. There's some places where it does go back. There's some places where it doesn't. And this, which is kind of your main and main, then there isn't any parking. There isn't any parking here, but there's some down here. And so our questions were about, should we be looking again at, how do you expand those lot depths, or how do you create parking specifically in the back? And when we look at these three things, we see that you've tried this before. That this has been, and we've heard from people in focus groups that this has been part of, you've tried this, but what we, looking at it, so we're really curious to hear from you. What were the challenges with implementation? Where do you think that things should be? Where should we pick up this conversation again, either with the public or also within the Planning Commission, to say what policy doors do we want to look at opening in this master plan in order to help to redevelop that downtown or your downtown area, which is really kind of focused here, or and then 12 Mile and Coolidge in general.
Okay, so I figured out how to be able to see people raising their hands. So, Mr. Murad.
So back in 2007, the thought was, let the market determine that line.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
So, if somebody put a business in and then they were able to buy a house that was behind their business to expand their parking or potentially expand their business, we let that happen. That was kind of the idea.
Well, we considered it.
Yeah, we considered
it was let the market tell us what's
Right.
going to happen.
Yeah, because the last thing anybody living along those corridors wants to see is us coming along and rezoning. We didn't want that straight line.
No.
Okay.
And we didn't want to have to rezone people's property, and then when it came time for some sort of an improvement or anything that they wanted to do, that now they're in a non-conforming situation and yada, yada, yada. So.
But then when these steps in the pink and the purple went back, was the idea that those would either be planned, those could be rezoned either to the use or to the parking in particular?
Yes.
Okay, and that you would take it on a case-by-case basis?
Case by case, yeah.
And is that the policy that do you feel that policy has been effective?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, the other commissioners might think so. But.
It's not ideal, but in a situation dealing with, we talked about 40-foot residential lots. Now we're talking about 40-foot commercial lots. In a situation we have, let the market decide. And, we could maybe steer it a little bit, as we did with the future land use, the 2007. We squared some things off, but it's not a whole lot different than what you see in the existing land use map or on the zoning map.
Mm-hmm.
We squared a few of them off, and we do, as Mr. Murad said, we do not want to draw an arbitrary line. That's something we did not at the time want to do. We do enough of that as it is, so that's why it looks like this.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
So we could always have the future land use map show increased parcel depth, but not rezone, and then the market would still have the opportunity to decide. So if someone did come along and collect those parcels, it would be easy for them to get that rezoning approved.
Right. Yeah.
Well, again, now you got the dilemma. You're impinging on people are here because they like the residential feel of the town. So I would caution us to expand those too much, because anytime we change something, whether it's zoning, even a master plan, future land use, we are impacting people properties and their homes. And, we can clean it up, of course, but I think we have to be careful. We're doing exactly, we're doing something exactly contrary to what most people move here for. So they like the small town feel. They like the residential feel. Obviously, the folks that live on the line, on the wall of their retail have to hopefully realize that someday something could happen, but we really have to be careful how we approach that.
Yeah, I would agree, making sure that the scale of the development matches the character of the city, but still having enough depth to allow for some development. And maybe that's what you were getting at, Megan, with your idea of having no parking on a parcel as a way to accomplish that.
Right.
And the DDA master plan did talk about a shared parking district, which I myself thought was a great idea and a good solution for how to address some of our parking issues, or perceived parking issues, I should say.
Yeah.
That we should move forward on.
Okay. Yeah. And really in the steering committee, we also talked about how if you build up or if you build more on 12 Mile, that the parking has to come along with it, because they're interrelated. So you need to talk about these two things together, and not not silo them. So we can do that. Again, any advice on how to have this, how to have this conversation with the community? It sounds like you feel like it's worthwhile to talk about. Look, if we want more redevelopment, if we want more vibrancy, we're going to have to make some changes. And here are some possible changes. And some of it's also building off of choices that you've already made as a community that are there. These would just be rounding things out.
Well, this is Mark again. We're time doesn't stand still, and the marketplace changes, and we have to be real about what we are able to put into our downtown district, and we need information to do that. We need to know what modern businesses require as far as square footage, as far as parking, as far as location, I personally would like to have more of that kind of information before making decisions on what the master plan should call for. We don't want to plan for development that's just not realistic for Berkeley. So my comment is, let's try to stay as grounded as we can when considering these changes. I guess my fear is that if we don't change anything, we're going to wind up with 70 or 80% vacant storefronts, because we'll just have an obsolete infrastructure of business properties, and no one will be interested in redeveloping them because the zoning rules will be not appropriate for that. I don't want to be in that situation either. So, so we have to be real about what we can do, but I do think we have to move forward. So I suspect we'll have to make some changes. I really like the idea of shared parking and expanded municipal parking, the idea of sharing, as opposed to having each business encroach on the neighborhood is very appealing to me. So I'd steer us in that direction.
Well, and these are also the areas where you do have some potential for that mixed middle housing, because retail's in flux, and so is office. And so what those storefronts are may not be that in 5 years. But there is demand for housing, and there is demand for that mixed middle housing, especially in a community like yours. So by opening up those uses up in the mix as part of a mixed use corridor, that's again a potential that's a place where you can have that type of housing for seniors, for disabled, but also for for young folks who are looking to stay in the community, or people who maybe, are looking to have something that's just not as much work as a single family home.
And this is Marty again, and what we talked about again 15 years ago is there's opportunities, and I mentioned the DPW yard earlier. We talked a lot about breaking up the monotony of the strip, and I'd be concerned about, and Tim, fill in, butt in if you think I'm going off astray here, but I'd be concerned about painting a brush across this 12-mile road, and maybe incrementally. And again, the DPW may be a position, a point of doing something new, and what we called catalytic projects. Again, it's archaic, but that's what we did. And I don't want to rub any noses, but the property of the bowling alley is a huge chunk of property.
Right.
And that may be an opportunity. There's certain there's certain areas on Coolidge that you have a little mishmash of little buildings. It's a wonderful opportunity to redevelop a large chunk, not a large chunk, but a significant chunk of a block. So maybe we identify some of these areas that have potential for redevelopment. And if nothing else, it piques the landowner. Maybe it piques the landowners. They start thinking about, well, they're talking about my property. Maybe I should do something to my property. So there are opportunities all over the place of taking chunks of properties and ripe for redevelopment. And I'd almost rather go in that direction than trying to paint a broad brush, if that's what we're talking about. But Tim, does that? You recall that's what we talked about way back.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
I gotta jump in here, Marty. That came up in the downtown development master plan, and it created all sorts of havoc. I mean, I'm for it because I think it shows the potential of what could be. It's just a slippery slope in Berkeley. People take it personally as if it's a mandate. So therefore, if we've put it in a plan, why put it in the plan if it's not going to be? I'm not really. I think they're great ideas to show, like, these are areas that could be done with the right vision, and they've got the land mass, and but it wreaked all sorts of havoc.
It sure did, Michelle. You're absolutely right. And
it was distracting.
We'll just say it was the Hartfield lanes. All of a sudden,
but there's other parcels too. And
I know, but that was the havoc. All of a sudden, people said, you can't knock down our property. And that's where the education comes in.
Right.
There's an opportunity zone, or whatever we want to call it. That's not even the right term.
Right.
The DPW yard, whatever. And they don't even have to be big properties. But there's areas, this could be one, and I don't know how to approach it. We didn't do it right last time. The DDA, obviously, everybody's hair was lit on fire. But that is the way to approach it. Maybe the education isn't there. Even when we talked about the way back, Tim, we talked about the amphitheater gathering space in Robina. Everybody went nuts. Well, we're going to tear down their buildings and stuff, and that's part of the education. What a master plan is.
Agreed, but you
have to do something.
Agreed. But this is what the steering committee, I thought, was supposed to accomplish, was come up with this kind of education and reaching out to the community, because this is a non-traditional way of doing the master plan. The Planning Enabling Act is pretty clear about how the master plan gets done. The city decided to go forward with the steering committee, and they're supposed to carry the water on this, and I don't see that that's been done.
Well, we wanted
to take them on. We're just in the idea phase right now. I think it's perfectly appropriate for the Planning Commission to provide direction.
Sure.
The steering committee then can take the ball and run with it. But we can't just go off half. What are we educating people on if we don't have a plan yet, or we don't even have agreement on the concepts that we're going to build the plan around yet. You know,
I would,
that's a bigger topic than just for the steering committee.
so I would guess that's what some of the focus groups try to accomplish, is reaching out to some of those people who probably needed more outreach and hand-holding as part of the DDA master plan.
Were those successful?
Yeah. I mean, we got really good, honest input, and again, you know, it sometimes it conflicted, but to me, the underlying theme is that everybody who lives in Berkeley really cares about Berkeley, and wants it to keep its core. And then there's a concern about, you know, can we keep our core and remain relevant? And so how do we do that? And part of our reason coming from you with these policy questions specifically is because you're the ones who will be implementing them, if they're in the master plan. And so wanted to know from you whether these are things to talk about, not talk about, and where to go with them. And you've provided really good input tonight. And also the history to us is invaluable. The steering committee's job is to kind of steer us to, you know, how do you reach out to people now and where they're at, and really, you know, your role is, you're the recommending body to the city council, but you know, in the end, you're the implementing body, and these have to all be ideas that you're behind as well. And so that's the reason that we're here tonight. So, and I think in terms of, you know, if we used, and again, lessons from other communities as well, if we used a site that's 150 feet deep to show what would go on, either we usually ask that property owner's permission to use their site and to show them the designs before we show them to the public, so that we have them on board. So when people say, oh, you're going to rezone it, then the person can say, you know, look, I was fine with this. Or we use a very generic thing, like I just showed you tonight with, you know, a pen and pencil drawing that's not set in an area. Sometimes we do need to set it on that corridor to show what it would look like for people. But what we sense from Berkeley is that just showing it in general on kind of that generic site would help. And then if we need to drill down to another area, it would be something probably like the DPW site that the city owns, or someplace where we could work with a property owner and say, look, we'd like to do this sketch. Is that okay with you? So in terms of that, you know, that's going forward. And so what I hear from you in 12 Mile is that continue to have the depth conversation, but really need solid examples of how a modern building in these different lot formats can work or can't work. And then what are some solutions that go along with it that take all of the impacts of the building, including parking, into account.
Aaron, Megan, or I'm sorry, Megan and Kristen and Tim, anybody who's more aware of the DDA down at master plan than I am. You know, I'll go back to the Hartfield Lanes. They were very surprised that people were doing drawings or redeveloping their site. Was there did anybody ask them their permission to do it? I think that's a great idea. Approach somebody and say, hey, you know, we want to do it generically to your site, but can we get permission to draw pictures and redesign your site?
So I do think there was miscommunication, excuse me, Marty, between the DDA staff and consultant and the property owners whose sites were drawn up. So
they seem very surprised.
Yeah, so I think that Megan brings up a good point that we wouldn't repeat that mistake.
Okay, I think it's a great idea. That's why she's a planner. She thinks of stuff like that.
Well, I know you have some other agenda items, and I know I've taken a lot of your time so far. We did have the mission, vision, and values that I would like to share, and get any feedback with. But I can also, we could also do it so that you would email any if you don't, I know that you have other agenda items, so I guess I'm asking you whether you want to go over those briefly, or whether you would rather email Aaron and I comments, criticisms, suggestions on that vision, mission, and values. We would hope to share that with the public in September.
I personally have nothing. I don't. Those mean nothing to me personally. So I'm being honest. It's the endeavor to endeavor comment. So if someone else has some input on it, fine. But I have nothing. I don't have any interest in discussing those.
So I would be fine with email as well.
Okay, great.
Everyone else, yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, then we will let you know if we have any comments on those.
I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And they would be the guiding values for the plan. So if it's something that doesn't call to you, doesn't resonate, or you don't feel like that would apply in situations, then by all means let us know, and we will look at changing that language.
Yep, and if there's a lot of conflicting ideas, we can have it as a future discussion item, but I wouldn't anticipate there would be.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Megan.
Great job so far.
Say hi to Ben.
I will say hi to Ben. It's been our pleasure. Bye.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
All right, Erin. So I guess we'll just keep going on the agenda then. So next up, we have some parking discussion items.
Yes, so this is a continued conversation that we've had over the past, we had last month and certainly going back into February. So you'll see in your packet that I've created a continuation of a memo. And what was brought up at the last meeting was that it was interested, sorry, that was a weird format. You were interested in seeing community comparables to other communities in Southeast Michigan. So I have prepared that information and sent that to you in a separate email. So I've looked at Lyon Township and Ferndale were the two that had been submitted to previously. And my document is not loading. City of Clawson, Village of Lake Orion, City of Troy. My pages aren't loading. I apologize. And I've also prepared the parking requirement modification section 138-226. This was something we also had been discussing at previous meetings. We've done a little bit of tweaking on the language. I have consulted with the city attorney in which we have added the cap of the 10% total parking requirement for a particular use as what was requested at the last meeting. Additionally, I put together some details and information related to the latest 3 developments that have come before the Planning Commission, specifically KinderCare, Aquatots, and the La Salette development, using that 10% threshold of the parking requirement for modification, if that was so to be given in those cases. So you'd be able to see what the maximum modification would be allowed in those developments if you were to utilize the maximum 10%. So I know this is a continued discussion item, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
This is Marty. Aaron, I like what you've done here. You've taken this a long way. I will be honest, I would like some more time to read and compare all these other communities. There was like 64 pages to read here for our meeting tonight. I spent an awful lot of time on the master plan, and I went through all this, but I wasn't able to compare what you did to the attributes of the other communities. And I would really like, and I don't know if everybody else put more time into it than I could, but I'd really like to have a little more time to look at some comparisons here before I make any final judgment or comments.
Anyone else with comments on this? Questions? I liked it. I thought that the suggested language was good. I wouldn't make any changes to it, actually. I thought it was good to go, but if people need more time to look at it and digest it a little bit more, I mean, that's fine too. I don't think we're in a huge rush on this one. Thoughts or comments from anyone else?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Patterson.
I do like that there's a cap that we have. I think that'll be helpful that the 10%. I do like that. I'm glad that was added in. I know there was discussion the last couple of times we've talked about this, so I did like seeing that. That's all.
Ms. Schluto, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, there was just one more follow-up. I did reach out to a number of the communities, Clawson, Lake Orion, Ferndale, Plymouth, and Troy, to get an idea as to how many times this parking modification is requested by the applicant. I know that was something that the Planning Commission was weary about it being something overly utilized for every single site plan that would come before you. So I reached out to all of them. I heard back from Ferndale, Plymouth, and Troy, and got varying responses. So Ferndale said that they use it, it's requested fairly often. About a third of their site plans that come before the Planning Commission have requested a parking modification. They're primarily for multifamily residential developments.
Yeah.
City of Troy, they use theirs fairly frequently, but usually for larger sites and commercials. They don't use it for single family or multifamily residential. And the evidence that is required is generally a parking study. Plymouth does theirs a little bit differently, and they just recently had an application that came forward for a change of use. And by the zoning ordinance standards, their deficiency was 21 spaces, but they presented information that showed that they would only be deficient by 3 spaces. So in lieu of those parking spaces, they paid into a parking fund. And that was approved by City Council. So everyone does things a little differently, but Plymouth said that they don't get a whole lot of requests for that because there's not a whole lot of new development going on in their downtown area. So in that sense, they're a little bit similar to what Berkeley would be going through.
Okay. Well, thank you. That helps. Of course, they're all different, but that helps.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, so maybe, Aaron, we look at bringing this back as a discussion item for just a final discussion to make sure everyone is okay with it before we proceed to setting the public hearing. And then we had one. Go ahead.
I'm the only one that wasn't happy with my time allowed to read this. If I'm the only one, by all means, let's go. But if anybody else would like some more time, since we're not in a hurry.
Yeah, we don't have Ms. Kempner or Mr. Trotto with us too here this evening, okay. So it might be good just to be able to collect their thoughts as well.
Marty, I value your informed opinion. If you need more time, by all means, I'm willing to grant it. I'm sure the chair is as well.
Yep.
Do we have we have a busy meeting next month?
No.
Okay. Let's bring it back if nobody objects.
Perfectly fine. Okay, so we have one additional discussion item tonight, and that's for ordinance text amendments for site plan projects and allowing extensions for site plan approval. Aaron?
Yeah, so I'd like to reference my review letter. It's included in your packet, and this is something that we've discussed at a previous meeting. Just making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the projects that would be required to go before Planning Commission for site plan review and those that would be reviewed administratively. So on the first page of the memo, I go section by section, similar to the memo that was provided to you. Well, that was back in February. So, and just kind of gave updates as to what you had requested. So the inclusion of parking to be clarified. We were looking at the threshold of how many spaces could be required for planning commission approval versus administrative. And I gave a couple examples of neighboring communities and what they require for any additional paving or impervious surface on their properties. Included a section here about revisions. We've discussed that, wherein what would constitute a major revision of a site plan would have to come before the planning commission, but minor revisions to an approved site plan within a certain threshold can be done administratively, and that would include landscaping, additional screening, or alterations of an interior parking layout that don't include adding any more impervious spaces. Lastly, we have a conformity, and this is something that one of the main reasons I'm bringing this back is currently our zoning ordinance does not allow any extensions of site plans. They're valid for 1 year from site plan approval. While most projects that may come before planning commission don't require any kind of an extension, our zoning ordinance specifically states that none will be given. And in extenuating circumstances, such as we are experiencing right now, it would be good to look at that and give some flexibility to those developments that have gone through the approval process, but hit a snag in their development that are maybe beyond their control. The examples that I brought up before were something along the lines of funding, or they had some environmental concerns that need to be mitigated prior to starting construction. But certainly now, when we're getting into, now that we're in the COVID situation, that has put some constraints on some developments that is going on in the city. So these are just a couple of things that that I had brought previously and wanted to continue the conversation with you this evening. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any comments or questions on these items?
Well, I have some, surprisingly enough. Let's go backwards. Conformity. I like that a lot, Aaron. It says request up to 2 1-year extensions. That's a lot of numbers in a row. Reviewed and granted by the planning commission. So they would come to us. It wouldn't be administrative.
Correct. There are communities that do administrative with good cause, but having it come before the planning commission is a good idea. That way, questions can be asked. It's a public meeting, and they're held a little bit more accountable to the timeline that they're giving you.
I think that's great. Let me go backwards now. The required information, number 18. Could we add, it says color and type of facade materials. Could we add samples representing color and type of facade materials? Because sometimes you just get a cartoon drawing. I'd like the actual, require actual samples of the materials.
Well, we can certainly add that. That is always something that I include in my review letters to the applicant to make sure that when they come before the planning commission, that they bring examples, either storyboards or other, those types of boards, to give you a physical, tangible thing to look at, as opposed to a rendering on a piece of paper.
Okay. Well, if you do it, that's fine. But I think maybe in the required information, it should be right there. Because sometimes, from experience, it could take a month or more to get some of those samples. It shouldn't, but it does. So let's just, if we can, just tell them heads up, they have to do it just from the beginning. If nobody has an objection to that. And I had one other thing. Did we, going back to the 50%, did we discuss a lower threshold than that at our last meeting? Did we talk about 40%? I don't know how well, I guess you can calculate it. Or did
we went back and forth on 40%, 30%. We ended up leaving it at 50% with the understanding and that this was included in the memo as well, that the zoning administrator or planner has the authority to send a plan or defer to the, send a plan or defer to the planning commission if the size, scope, intensity of a project should be reviewed by the planning commission.
Okay.
That's kind of
Thank
where
you.
we landed it, but if the planning commission wants to lower the threshold to 40% of one facade, 30% of one facade, this is where we can have that conversation again.
Okay. I'm done.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? I liked all of these changes. I didn't have any comments on it. I think we're ready to proceed with it unless anyone else has any comments or questions or objections.
This Mark, I support the chair in that. I also like it. I think it very accurately reflects the discussions that we have had about this. I think maybe we should move on to the next phase here and have a hearing.
I'm fine with that. This is just the language is the first time that Commissioner Kempner or Commissioner Torado would have seen it. Just want to, if we want to hold off and leave that to the next meeting and keep it as a discussion. They haven't had the opportunity to comment on the official language of it.
I have no objection to that, as a courtesy to them. Not at all.
Yeah, we could definitely, just be consistent with the previous item. We could definitely do that. Are there any site plans that are in danger of expiring that would miss the opportunity for an extension if this were not pushed forward and put in place immediately?
Well, we do have, KinderCare has gone through. La Salette, we're scheduling our pre-construction meeting. They've gotten all their plans approved. Aquatats is the only one that hasn't secured anything. Theirs was approved at the December Planning Commission meeting. So we do have a little bit of time.
Okay, so since this wouldn't impact any development projects, yeah, let's just follow the same track as previously. Thank you for pointing that out, Aaron. Okay, so I think that's all set on the discussion items then, and we'll move on to liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report on this evening?
This is Mark Richardson. I will keep it briefer than I was going to. City Council. There was a presentation to the City Council by Dr. Don Carpenter in association with Clinton River Watershed Council, regarding recommendations for stormwater detention projects within the city of Berkeley. And these would be stormwater detention projects which would provide an aesthetic quality to the community, as well as serving the function of stormwater detention. And I'm going to wait until our next committee meeting before returning to the Planning Commission with some more detailed comments, but I will just say that Dr. Carpenter studied 5 areas and for potential stormwater detention, and to me, one of the more interesting areas was J.C. Park. He suggested that there's potential there for rain gardens. Also studied the possibility of permeable pavement in combination with some additional green space in some of the parking areas we were talking about earlier in the meeting along 12 Mile near Griffith Avenue, to be precise, and at the Parks and Recreation building site as well. And then there's a couple of other projects as well, but I will provide perhaps be able to provide a few more details after our next meeting. I think this is a exciting development for us. There is a $5,000 grant available from the Watershed Council, which provides for an in-kind match, and that $5,000 grant would be to provide seed money to implement one or more of these projects should the city decide to do that. So we're moving forward with a project which will benefit the community and meet a community need, and I'm excited to be a part of it. That's it.
That does sound like a great project. Mr. Murad.
Yeah, just wanted to update on the chamber. Pretty much all chamber events have been postponed or canceled. So that's about it. They are still doing like chamber chats, but they're doing them like a Zoom. So.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, that brings us to commissioner and staff comments. So I will just kind of go down the list here. Commissioner Richardson, anything else to add?
It doesn't have to be tonight, but at some point I'd like to be updated on the progress of licensing marijuana facilities in Berkeley. That seems to be a kind of a blank slate for the past few weeks or months. I'd just like to know what's going on.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, a couple very short things. Aaron, I want to thank you. Your very concise memorandums to us on these items, very thorough, very helpful. Appreciate the way you're doing this. And then, and one of my other things, how's our vinyl siding building on 11 Mile coming? Any progress on that?
Well, I just spoke with him the other day. He had come in. We had talked before everything shut down back in February, and he was working with an architect. It is part of an application that we're discussing. I can't give any more details than that, but there are steps moving forward. He is working with an architect to try to bring that into conformity.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Patterson?
Nothing to add. I agree with Commissioner Smith that I really like the letters that you sent out, Aaron, and I appreciate those a lot. They really help. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell?
I just want to thank the staff for the stuff they do and putting the Zoom meeting together. I appreciate it. It's not the optimal way, but and it requires more work than you'd think. So thanks to all of them as well. That's all I got.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Buckler?
No comments, thanks.
And Commissioner Mira, no, nothing to add? Okay. Aaron, anything to add?
I can just answer Commissioner Richardson's inquiry. We have received a number of applications for marijuana. The deadline for submittal was June 29th. We have gone through the completeness checks. That was the first step of going through and making sure that the applicants had submitted everything that we had required of them. So those have been done, and now next we go to scoring through the merit point system. So we have until September 29th to publish the scores for all the applicants, and that's per our ordinance that was adopted last year.
Thank you. And I don't have anything additional either. I would echo everyone's comments about a thank you to the staff and the city as a whole for not really skipping a beat, as we've all kind of dealt with these changes over the past couple months. And we will look forward to our next Planning Commission Zoom meeting, provided. So right now, Aaron, that would still be virtual, if I'm correct? Because it's the emergency declaration plus the 28 days.
That's how I understand it. There has been some confusion as to whether or not that was extended through the EO or 28 days from when. So, but I anticipate and expect it'll be a virtual meeting in August.
Okay. So does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
There we go. Okay. Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Patterson?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckler,
Yes.
Commissioner Campbell,
Yes.
Chair Kaplan-Lansky.
Yes. Okay, everyone have a good evening, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Good night.
Thank you.
Hey.